How you guys doing? Good? Can everybody hear me in the back? Everything sound okay? Yeah? Kenny, you want to say hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Already got that?
Hi, how's it going, guys?
Good. Alba's all magical. No hands. Welcome to our seminar today. We decided that seminars where people sit at tables are boring. And so you guys have probably been to a few of those, so we're going to stand up here and talk today. We constitute a team from Anvil Bar and Refuge primarily in Houston. And then these two folks are opening a new bar called Julep here very soon, which will be Alba's bar. We're really excited about that. And we have a problem in Houston. And the problem is that there are not enough qualified bartenders to make drinks. Is anybody else having this problem? Right? We've either worked with everyone in the city that is talented and they are now running their own cocktail programs, right? Have avoided the crazy people, or are just looking for people with a fresh foundation that we can build from, that really want to come work hard and learn what we're doing in our bars. And I think that maybe a year and a half ago, we made this transition from just inviting people to come work with us, where we would spend time together in the same bar every single day, and we would show them things like, here's how to make a daiquiri, and here's the recipe for this cocktail. And we really started to realize that if we were going to continue to do what we wanted to do in our city, which by the end of the year we'll run 8 different businesses, a mixture of restaurants, bars, coffee shops, that we needed to get better at training. And that we really needed to take seriously a regimented program that would get people from the point at which we hired them to the point that we wanted them to be, and that we felt comfortable with that person taking on the huge responsibility of keeping our guests as happy as we would like to see them every single day. And that's a big deal. You know, when we have people coming in town that we want to make a really good impression upon, and we've got a bartender who's worked 6 months behind the bar, you know, maybe we can't run up there every single day to make sure that everything's right. And I feel like that's really the test for your staff. How do you feel about your staff when you're not there, right? Do you feel like they're executing the exact same program, that they're representing the same ideals that you represent behind the bar? And so I think that a lot of that has to do more with just trying to generate a culture in your bar. And that's what training is really about. It is trying to formalize some type of culture that represents who you are, and develop that into your bar program. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you formalize all of that ethos and pathos into something that's more than just, here's the recipe for our specs on a Manhattan. And that's a really, really challenging concept to get around. So.
And another thing, I think probably about a year ago or maybe last fall, we posted our outline we put it out on social media, and we got a lot of attention over it. And honestly, that's one of the first things we do during interview process now. Like, the training program is very honest. Like, it's right there, you get to see it. It's a really good way of communicating with people what the expectations are. And it's also a way to draw in the right people. So you're being honest with everyone and letting them know that it's going to be really hard. But it can either draw the right people or deflect those people that the program, it's not for them. And with that, along with that, we ended up having ourselves, we saw that in order to make progress, we needed to make these changes. And as much as it is a part of training, like, being a good trainer is just as important. So for us, we wanted to put this training program together that was very, very intricate. But in order for us to be able to execute that, we put ourselves through a number of different things in order to be able to provide that kind of training for someone. So you put the expectations out there, but you also have high expectations on yourself. So it's a very two-way street here. Like, no one here is getting the better out of anyone else.
Yeah. And one thing that I've done today is I put the link to the presentation up on our Facebook and Twitter profile. So if you want to download that later or follow along, you can just go to twitter.com/Anvil Houston, ANVIL Houston, and you can download it there. You do have to have a Dropbox account, or you can go to our Facebook page and download it there too. So all the content that we're going to go through today, you guys can grab later, and then we don't have to give you something else to carry around today. So, all right, and then last but not least, we just wanted to make sure that we thanked our sponsors today, Bowmore and Auchentoshan. I don't know, yeah. We have kind of extreme opinions on spirits, and so because we tend to offend everyone, it's really difficult for us to find brands that are willing to sponsor that we're also really proud to have as sponsors. So we're really thankful to have Akintoshan and Bowmore support today because they're brands that we enjoy pouring in our bars that we feel like are of quality that represent us well, and we're just really happy to have you guys today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna get into this in two parts mainly. First, instead of bartenders creating a lot of weird PowerPoints, we're just gonna talk about 6 key areas for training, right? And then after that, we're gonna kind of get into what our actual training outline looks like. And we're gonna move through that training outline somewhat quickly. We're not gonna follow every single bullet point because I feel like you guys can review that later if you want to in more detail. So in the beginning, we're just gonna talk about the 6 areas of bar training that we feel like are important to us and important to our staff, okay? And so we're gonna get started with cocktails.
Yeah, so for cocktails, the name of this seminar is Beyond the Cocktail. So beyond the recipe. And the way I kind of view training is that you enable your bartender to be able to look past the recipe to where they just internalize the recipe, and that way they can allow themselves to actually be bartenders, be personalities, and be able to do all the things that are important beyond the drink. Because everybody expects a good drink whenever you come into a bar, and we try to supply that every single time. So it's important in our bar, we have over 100 drinks that we're always making. And it's such a huge load that we really focus the first couple weeks of our training program on nailing those drinks down. So where you're just making drinks every single time. You learn every single recipe. And the moment that you're able to ingest that and sort of make it mechanical and just sort of like almost
second nature, almost.
Yeah, it's second nature where you're not even thinking about it any longer. Yeah. That's the point to where you can sort of move beyond and become a real bartender and be able to enjoy your job and have fun.
And I think that says a lot about like our philosophy, right? Like it's, you know, we do pass out a menu at Anvil with 108 drinks on it. And so when we give you a cocktail menu with 108 drinks on it, you know, we need to be able to put those out as quickly as possible. But for us, I feel like when we talk about cocktails as a community, we spend so much time talking about specs and brand preferences and how does this work and how does that not work. I mean, that should just be part of the bar. It should be developed, and those opinions, I mean, if you're even considering opening your cocktail bar, should be so firmly established. It's like, this is how I like to make my Manhattan, okay? So let's make it part of the staff immediately, and then how do we get past that point, right? We just want to get past the point of, please memorize the 108 recipes as quickly as possible, right? And Kenny, do you feel like people go through that differently?
How so? For what?
Like different personalities and whatnot? I mean, do you... Because Kenny spends a lot of time specifically with
People,
individual new
one-on-one.
staff members working on recipes and
yeah.
stuff like that. Are there different tricks for different people that work different ways and stuff like that?
Yeah, some people, they absorb recipes just like that. And they're very like rationally minded. They have like this very like numbers sort of like attitude to where they just know how to absorb recipes and be able to make it. Other people, it's literally just having to do the exact same drink 12, 15, 20 times every day, day in and day out, and they struggle with actually remembering numbers. But the moment that they become to where it's like muscle memory, then so it's different that way. So yeah, some people can like remember the recipe just by reading off a sheet, and some people actually have to make the drink over and over and over again.
A huge part of that, of standardizing these 100, well, we actually have 108 recipes. So we have 100 classics and 8 house menu drinks. And bringing together that 100 list had a lot to do with the current staff, because we started the training program about 1.5 years ago. And at that time, we had members that had come into the program at different times. So catching everyone up to speed at that point was very important. So we had to analyze the entire group. And we're really big about the group because the group is very important. This is a job that you can't do on your own. Like working in this bar is impossible to do it by yourself. So we focus mainly on the group. And we ourselves are always constantly bringing in new product, and we're always trying to make the best cocktail that we can with the product that's available to us. In doing so, and standardizing 100 recipes, it became a project for the entire group. And whether that's your program or not, whether you want to start with 30 cocktails or like at the pastry war, we have 30 classics that we want everyone to know. that we feel everyone should know that works at that bar. And at the Julep training program has 85 that we've been able to work through so far. Amble has 100. So they're all a little bit different, but the group itself at Amble at that time became really important because they all worked on this individually, and we started standardizing all of these recipes so that when we started with the training program, we could have a packet that we could present to someone that's just coming in new, and we could tell them, these are our recipes and this is how we want you to do it. But catching everyone up was very, very important. And also, we talk a lot about what the investment is to train someone. You know, there's investments kind of scattered all over the map. Like, there's a huge investment of time. Our training program is 12 stages. And because there are different people going into this program and they all learn differently, that can take anywhere between 12 weeks to 24 weeks to 36 weeks, and it really just depends on the individual. So you don't move into the next stage until you've mastered that one that you're on. But everybody just learns differently. And at the same time, if you work at a bar, you know that that bar doesn't close the doors. Like, it's still going. So there's, you know, people that started the program in the fall had to see the, like the holidays, and trying to keep up with the training program during the holidays was incredibly hard. Like, it's just almost impossible. But again, the trainer, the trainee, you have to be there for them, and you have to make the commitment just as much as they do to be able to have those tests ready for them and to be able to have the product available for them. And it's just as tasking on the person that's learning as it is on the person that's teaching.
And I think that's one of the really important parts of developing a good training program. It is so much easier to give someone a list of 108 cocktails and say, these are the recipes, right? That's every single person in this room can develop whatever their opinion is on drinks, put them all on a piece of paper and hand it to someone and say, this is how we're going to run the program. But in doing so, you don't develop any stakeholders, right? And stakeholders are what make really great bars. You need people in bars who are willing to push the bar program better, to add assets to the program that make things better than who you could be independently. And so a lot of that is as soon as we get past those recipes in the first couple weeks, you know, as individuals who are monitoring all these people, you know, we learn things really, really quickly. Like, if you pick up recipes and you can just rapid fire through them, I actually might be concerned about your social skills. Right? You know, so we're learning things about you very, very quickly. It's like I knocked out 108 cocktail recipes in 3 days. All right, you're that guy. That's outstanding. So, you know, and that happens. You know, so it's but at a certain
another developmental program, developmental problem at some point in training, because all of these skills are necessary. They're just people at different times are going to capture them at different times.
And so after we get past those recipes, you know, it's how do we create stakeholders, and that's about spending time with people. So, you know, that's why it says balance creation. How do you teach someone to create cocktails? Like, how does that even happen? How does that occur? I think that for us, we start with classics. Obviously, we have this 108 drink menu because when we first opened the bar, which was an interesting experience for us because we had never been to another cocktail bar ever. So we opened Anvil in March of 2009 and never visited another cocktail bar until I went to PDT the first time in September of 2009. So I just had a list of 100 drinks that I wanted our staff to know how to make, right? And these staff members, for some reason, decided to share that list with our guests. So our guests turned that into a menu, and we've never been able to really look back. So we've always kind of had 100 drinks on the menu because they were like, look at what this guy's making me learn. It was kind of a weird situation. But that's how we ended up with 100 drinks on our menu. But getting people beyond that point is really important. So we'll take those classics and we'll use them as a basis for creation, right? So one of the first things that we do with our staff after we've gone through recipes is we transition them to a point where it's like, okay, so for this week, we need you to give us a riff on this type of classic, right? So let's say that we want them to create an original cocktail that is an expanded Collins, for example, right? So we break that down into its components, all right? So we've got a spirit. You can use any spirit that you want. This is how this cocktail works. We've got a citrus. This is all the citrus that we have available to us in Houston, right? These are times of the year when it comes in. This is citrus that we can get at Caninos, which is our Mexican market in Houston. These are things that are available from the farmer's market. This is when things taste best. This is how citrus works in balance. This is how things are going to expire or not expire. all of these things, and we use that as an opportunity to talk about that. And then we get into a sweetener, right? These are the types of sugar that are available, right? This is the basis for creating a simple syrup. If you wanted to create a flavored simple syrup, this is the process that you would go through to do that, right? And then finally, there's some aspect of carbonation. These are the brands that we have available to us. This is how you can use a soda siphon. I mean, these are all of these different tools, right? And by taking that cocktail and using it as a vehicle to explain how this process works and creating an assignment that's built around that one cocktail, then we've started to teach them a little bit of, this is how you modify an existing classic, right? And if you can learn how to modify an existing classic, present these 3 cocktails to the staff. We have Tuesday meetings. Every single Tuesday, the staff sits down. We go over the numbers, how much our sales were, what our labor cost was. It's a totally open book, every single thing about it.
What happened, what's new, what's out, what are we missing? Everything gets covered. It's like going to church for those non-church goers. We have it every Tuesday.
Bar church.
Bar church.
Bar church.
But every single moment that we have with our staff members is used as a teaching moment. So every single moment we have with them is somebody's learning something, whether it's they're doing inventory for the first time, or we're talking about how a shift was handled, or there's always a communication between us and the staff member about their progress, and every single moment that we have with them is used we use it so that they can learn. And you have to do that. You have to be able to communicate with people where they are. I actually had this conversation with Dan Prizeman a few days ago, and he's like, I have the staff member, and he was great, and because he was great, I didn't tell him he was great, because the good ones, you just, they're self-manageable. You just assume that they'll take care of themselves, which is true. At the same time, it's always really important that we talk to them regularly so that they know that they're doing well, so that they know they're doing great. And those people that we know are going through different things. So having open communication with your staff is so important, even when they're great and even when they're not. There's not a single moment that goes by that you shouldn't be able to talk to them about their performance, whether it's good or bad. And that's also good for you, so you are able to communicate with them better. And your expectations are very clear. Being clear and being honest is so important, because it can't be confusing. So that's the reason why our outline looks the way it does. Yeah, it is very, very heavy. It's a very, very hard thing to consume, but it's just very honest.
And the other part of that, too, is that when they're developing these cocktails, so they've got the assignment of creating 3 twists on classics. They present those in the Tuesday meeting to the same staff members that have been through that training program before, right? So that when we evaluate them as a group, we evaluate them from the perspective of, we've had this experience ourselves, right? So you're not out there on an island by yourself. There's a whole pool of people in front of you that have done the exact same thing that you're doing now and are giving you feedback because this is the same feedback that they got when they were going through the program. So that creates more cohesion and more of a sense of a team mentality, because you're having people go through similar experiences. And then as we get through that process, then we move on to more original creation, right? So all cocktails stem from classics in all likelihood. There are very few originals out there. But even so, as we get into this area where people are experimenting less directly with an established cocktail, then whole other talking points come up at that point in time, right? So I've got this cocktail and I'd like to use this spirit. Oh, well, we don't actually want to use that spirit, and here's why. Because, Saza tequila drains lots of industrial waste into rivers, right? So we're not going to use Saza tequila in our bar, and then I had to work it in. We get to a point where we're going to talk about that, right? But that's important to us, and it's important to our bar, and it's who we are, right?
Absolutely.
That is Anvil. We're proud of the spirits that we serve. You work for people that in seminars will randomly call out brands, right? And then people are going to come into that bar and engage their bartenders. We have to know how we can get our bartenders to understand who we are and to buy into that bar program, right? And so that's a talking point, and it comes from, I would like to create this cocktail, right? Well, here's why that cocktail is not interesting, right? Or why we wouldn't put it on the menu, or why it costs too much for us to serve 1.5 ounces of green chartreuse in a market where we can only charge $9 per cocktail, right? So using the cocktail as a vehicle, right, and moving beyond that recipe really quickly gets you to really key identity parts in terms of how the product relates, and by product I mean cocktail, how that product relates to who you are as a bar and how you operate as individuals, right?
And I think Kenny's really good at this during the training process, and he's been behind the bar now at Anvil for about 3 years. And he's been able to see us grow in a way that most people won't, because they were in the program before, or they're just now getting there. But he saw us go through this expansion period. And when people start training with Kenny, and he becomes the hardest person to work for in the bar because the level of expectation is so high. And he's just been there for so long. But I've seen people who are just getting behind that bar for the first time, and they'll get the shakes, or they get nervous, and he just comes up behind them, and he's like, "Don't worry about it, man. I used to be there. That used to happen to me," and it's so
I was way
comforting.
worse. I was breaking glasses.
Yeah, he was so comforting.
Lots of glasses.
He still breaks glasses. Is
Stacks
inaccurate.
of glasses.
Yeah, this is past tense, Kenny. I don't.
But it's a really nice group mentality that you can have people come into the program that way, But I think overall, the amount of work and the amount of resources that we put into the program are so well worth it. And we just started doing the julep training about 2 months ago is when we started. And right around the point of the 6-week mark is when I pointed out to the staff that we have spilled, because at this point we were making drinks every day and everybody was learning the recipes, and I told them that we had spilled about 1 night's worth of product. So about $9,000 to $10,000 in sales is what we'd spilled up to the 6-week mark. There's really no other way for me to break that down for someone. I cannot make this environment of 300 people walking into your bar and let you know what that feels like until you experience it over and over and over. And if you don't have a group that's willing to help you through that and help you get through the darkness, it can get really hard. And I think that's a really, really strong point about training, is that there's one person training, but there's so many people around you that are willing to get you through it. So engaging the entire staff and engaging the entire program has everything to do with the group mentality.
Okay, let's move on to tasting. Speaking of tasting, you guys are drinking an Auchentoshan julep. How is it? It's good. It's good. It's good because the cap guys are awesome. Okay, so let's give them a hand, right? I feel like they're the unseen people at Tails because they're just back there working the whole time and making this all go, and so we owe them a whole lot. While we're getting drunk at Alba in 4 a.m, they're getting ready to get up in a few hours, so thank you guys so much for everything you do. All right, tasting. So we want our bar staff to have a comprehensive and capable palate, right? So in 2 regards, we want them to be able to speak with some level of experience about everything that we choose to carry, and that we want them to be able to apply that. So it's comprehensive and capable. As part of our training program, moving through those 12 weeks, which we'll get to in a little bit, the last stage in that training program is that you have to be able to blind taste and identify 50 spirits. You have to get 45 out of 50 correct, right? So they're just in front of you. You have to taste them all at once, right? Which is really hard and not the best way to do a tasting, but that's how it is, right? So it's.
But there's a standard, and you have to meet it.
That's the standard, and
that's it.
Yeah.
It's right here. It's on paper. We have talked about it. It's been discussed. It's the standard. So
and
you do it, or you do it.
Our most recent trainee, I think he got 44 out of 50.
Oh yeah, he did it
6
several
times in a row.
too. Oh,
He was
awesome.
stuck on training forever and it was just well, I'm sorry, I guess there's next week.
And
right?
every time he would taste it, he'd be like, okay, I'm going to start with the brown spirits this day.
Yeah, so he got better at tasting, but also when he passed, we were upstairs in the office. Kenny and I were upstairs in the office, and I heard somebody scream, and I was like, what is happening? Because it's Tuesday, I'm like, it's Tuesday, we're not open.
We only have screaming on Friday and Saturdays.
Yeah, we only have screaming on Friday and Saturdays. And then I just hear these heavy footsteps up the stairs, and I'm like, what happened? And he's like, I passed! And it was so awesome. It was so awesome to see him so happy. And and I'm an adult. I'm 34 years old. He's 34 years old also. And I don't think at this point in our lives we get a lot of victories. We see a lot of things, but we get into a point of our lives where we've establish our careers and we're doing all these things, but that's a victory, and that was a win for him, and it's so good. It was so great.
And this is someone that has bartended for 15 years who moved from St. Louis to work with us, right? And that's that hard. And I actually think that our desire to do this reflects like an opinion that I have about a lot of craft cocktail bars, and that's that people don't blind taste enough, right? And that they don't know their spirits as much as they should. And I think that by laying them out there and forcing people to understand that, I mean, it's not an opinion. It just is what it is. That's Calvados and that's Applejack, and you mixed them up, and that's just they're not right. You need to know the difference, outside of what the text difference between those two products is, right? We can read that on Wikipedia. Like, I would expect the bartenders can taste that and know that and understand the difference and understand how they work in cocktails. So for us, that's a really important part of the program. The other thing here is that the bar with 108 drinks on it is going to put so much stuff in front of you, right? And there's so much quality control, and the only real way to do quality control is through tasting over and over and over again. Tasting a cocktail when you put it out, especially tasting those first drinks that you do every single day. I hear a lot of bars say, well, we taste every drink. We don't taste every drink, right? I think it's repetitive, and we serve a lot more drinks than some cocktail bars, so it would be really difficult for us to taste every single drink and still stand at the end of the night, even if they were straw tastes. But tasting at the beginning of the shift, knowing what those products should be, that there's an identity to what the grenadine is that's not the red bottle, right? That it's this vibrant flavor that you should just know all the way through your core, and that you should be able to taste that, understand that. The ginger beer, we keg our ginger beer. The ginger beer keg needs to be shaken. It's settled a little bit, over the last couple of hours, and to just know that product all the way through. The only quality control in those situations is not a timeline or saying that this is the shelf life. It's tasting, right? And it's tasting over and over and over again, not getting fatigued, and just knowing it and having that identity in your palate. And that's so important. Recognizing the seasonality in ingredients, knowing that mint is better at some times than others, and adjusting all that only comes through tasting experience and by encouraging people to taste, which, like Alba was saying, means that you need to spend the money on training through product, right? You need to write it off. You need to let it go. You need to not worry about the spillage associated with that. Make sure it's accounted for so that you can monitor at all times and distinguish between how that's factoring into your bar cost and what regular sales were, right? But let it be a part of their palate's identity, that they know all those products and they're so intimately familiar with them that they don't move from what that standard is. Do you have a question?
Yes. So when you're doing a spirit tasting, are you asking them to identify brands or categories?
Categories, which is rye, which is a bourbon with more of a rye mash as opposed to a wheated mash, right? So we'll ask them to call those out, but not brands. So it's everything. I mean, you can probably pick out which one the Campari is from the rye, just based on color. But then, which one's Campari and which one's Aperol? Things like that. So I think the real challenge is being able to do all 50 at once, right? Which I think is that you're getting that fatigue, which again I think mimics the shift, right? Like, I'm tasting all of these different things. I'm putting out 108 cocktails. My palate not only has to be able to do this, but it has to be able to do it under pressure. Right?
But your palate is a muscle just like anything else. Like, we train people to be able to handle volume. So we train them to be able to handle 300 people in one room, And at the same time, you have to do that with your palate just as well. And without putting that investment into your staff, they can't do that on their own. It's something that you have to embed into your program. We do things, we do a cocktail class once a month, for example, where we'll find ways to pay for these things. So we'll do things that we'll create work for ourselves to be able to pay for these things that are offsetting us. So we will always find a way to do it. But that's also an investment on our behalf, because we want to make sure that our staff is better. Like, we'll do events, and if we need to create more work for ourselves to be able to generate more revenue, then we do that. But there's always a way. Just like being resourceful is just that. We will find a way. We will find a way to train someone. We will find a way to pay for it, and we will find a way, because the desire is real, and the need for it is very real.
But if you take like for us, every bar works different. But in our bar at Anvil, we have 5 bartenders. We have no servers. So we have 2 bar backs, and we have a door guy. That's the staff. And we live in Houston, Texas. So if you try and hold a line, people get really upset with you. So we just let everybody in.
Mad.
So we have anywhere from 150 to 250 people in our bar on a Friday or Saturday night. I think, and I say this a lot, I think Anvil is probably one of the more high-volume cocktail bars in the country, and there's no support between you and the guest. It's just bartender and guest, and you're handling the crowd. And so when you think about it that way and you think about the number of people per bartender, I think it's easier to spend $7,000 to $8,000 per person on a trainee because they're so individually important to the bar actually executing service every single night, right? I mean, they're 20% of your Friday or Saturday night if they're one of the bartenders on the staff. How do you not invest that into training, right? And I think that my experience as an employee for other people before I opened my own bars was that no one ever invested that money, and I was left in a situation as an employee where I either decided to make myself better, right, or I just stayed where I was at, right, which is what I tend to do when I was younger, and as I got older, I started to train myself, and I think that that's how this movement got started in cities all around the country in so many different ways where people were just eager and they took it upon themselves to learn more. I think that as a community, we have to move beyond that point, right? And you as operators have to move beyond that point if you want to be successful, because there are more and more programs where that culture is intact, where people can go to learn, right? So if you're not developing that education within your culture, and if you're not willing to put that money into your program, it's really hard to tell a staff member why they should come to work for you as opposed to someone else, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think about that with our staff all the time. Right? It's such a hard job, and they could make 3 times as much money working somewhere else. Why do they come to work for us every single day? Right? Do they do it because they love cocktails? Yeah, they probably do, and they love spirits, right? But what is the actual value they're getting out of it aside from just this emotional connection with some aspect of the industry? And I think that as we've done more things and as we've grown, that's the pressure that I feel more every single day, is I feel like I owe it to our staff to always be teaching them. Right? And at a point in time, if the staff can't learn more from us, that they need to move on and go do something else, right? Because I'm no longer valuable, right? And that's the biggest pressure that I feel all the time. We have a bar called the Pastry War, which is our new mezcaleria, and we've kind of been in this staff transition with that bar where staff members have been working at the Pastry War, waiting for Julep to open, right? And so we've been kind of juggling 3 different cocktail programs at the same time, and I feel like we've neglected that bar just a little bit in terms of the actual training that exists there, because I've spent so much time there and Alba has. We're always there, so we can talk you through it while we're there. But as we're going through this transition where we're growing, right, we need to have that program in place. And I feel
it's also a mixed group. We have a group of people, like we all work at the Pastry War. We also work at Anvil. People see us behind all of these bars. And you have this mixed group of people into this new bar that has a program that needs to develop. And because of that, we haven't quite captured the identity, because the identity is elsewhere. So, and it's been wonderful and great to have all of these things happen. And the behind the scenes is a lot easier for us to understand why these things are valuable. But at the same time, we can't generate that program because it's not there. And the thing with Julep is, how do we start a program for a bar that's not even open yet? At Anvil, we were able to say, okay, we have this bar, and this is happening, so then we do this. And this bar hasn't even opened yet. So we're training people just to have enough skill to get behind the bar first. Because the real training happens one-on-one, person to person, the 150 conversations that you're going to have with people all day long. That's the real training, and I can't provide that environment for you until this bar opens. And then their training, although they've had enough training to get behind a bar, their first day of training is the first day we open that door. But we've been able to train a group of 8 people for the first time, which is a little bit different, and learning from how you can train one individual, because we generally hire one person at a time to go into the program at Anvil. Well, for Julep, we hired 8. And managing 8 personalities and training 8 personalities has been awesome. And you learn so much more about yourself in that situation than you do about anything else. You would think that I put myself through this situation where it's when's the last time I trained to do anything? What have I done? It's this relinquishing power, You're walking into a program and you're just relinquishing power and you're not resisting and you're allowing yourself to be taught something is so hard, you know. And to do that with 8 people was quite difficult. And we do that one at a time at Anvil, and then, you know, it's just learning how we can become better at training people. And, you know, to Bobby's point, like, you can either not learn anymore if you don't have a solid training program. Your options are that you can't learn anymore and you continue to do what you do, or they look for programs. Your staff will look for programs and they will look for the thing that they need. If they need more training, they will go find it. I can't tell you how many different resumes I get from around the country of people who want to come do our program. It's really impressive, and I think that for the 14 years that I've been in the bar industry, I've never really had anyone come to me and ask me for more work, because people generally aren't like, I need more work and I get paid too much. Like, that doesn't happen. So people come to you and they're like, I'm not motivated, or I need this, and they're talking to you. They're telling you that they need more. You know, and if that's happening to you, you should really consider doing a program or starting to standardize a program that trains people in different ways, because they will eventually find what they're looking for. You know, and it may not be with you. And whenever that happened with us with Kenny, we're like, okay, let's start. let's do this. Let's. You're right. Let's look for some programs. Let's get this program together. Let's look for some more training. We definitely need to do more reading. We have required readings for our staff, even though most of the work is mechanical. We have we ask them to read books about service, and we ask them to read books about the history of cocktails, and all of these things are important so that they can create the right rhetoric behind our bar.
And it's amazing what happens to you when you actually choose to structure this. When you get it out of this like loose expectation that you have in your head of what your staff should know or not know, and you actually put it down on paper so that everybody's working really hard to get ready to come to Tails, right? The last thing that I'm doing Monday night before I come to Tails is I'm trying to get the vocabulary list down for the pastry war, right? So I wrote like 400 words, right? Kaylin works at the pastry war. This is coming, by the way. So like 400 words, like some in Spanish, some in English, and it's just this list, and it's the most important thing in my life right now is that I get this list done, right? Because we have staff members that are willing to come work for us, and that creates debt on my side as an ownership where I need to give them back information and education, because she just left her job, and so now I am indebted to her to give her information and content, and that's the most important thing that I feel like as a bar owner that I need to be doing, right? And that kind of transitions to history and education, and like the books that we choose to have our staff read, I think they're different for everybody.
They are, and we also keep up with readings. We keep up with the books that are out, like Morgenthaler's book came out. We were talking about putting that into the program. And
Definitely.
It keeps us well-read too. So again, due diligence. So we have to, we cannot expect you to do these things if we can't do them ourselves. And that has a lot to do with the fact that we are bartenders at heart. So we come from bars, and we know the things that we went through and how we would want that to be different for our staff. And you know, the readings will change, and they're different from concept to concept, but there is an element of required reading. So if that's not your thing, then you need to reconsider the program. You need to reconsider our program and perhaps move on and do something else.
Yeah, there's such like a good value to reading and like the history and education of spirits and cocktails, and like trying to condense it down and even do like a 12-week program, or if it reaches longer, it's just like, it's too daunting. So we always just kind of break it down to where 1 week we'll have readings on gin, or on a particular cocktail book, or on a particular cocktail. But the whole idea is really just to kind of keep it as like an introduction to where they learn a little bit of foundation of like the particular spirit or the particular era of cocktails, or whichever the focus is for that week. But the idea is to kind of generate an interest and something that they can have a little bit of a talking point whenever they're actually behind the bar talking with people. But then they actually go back, and then they might finish the reading, and they might pick up another book following it up. So I love to like see people learn a little bit about a particular spirit and then find out that they don't know enough. So then they go buy another book, and then another book, and it just kind of grows and kind of snowballs. And that's really the whole focus. That's what I wanted people to see and do, is to not feel like, okay, I'm just going to read this one chapter on
Because I have to.
because I have to take a test and then I'll be done with it. I know everything there is to know.
And not everybody's as voracious of a reader as Kenny. Like, I think Kenny probably beats
I've
us to
moved
most of the
Kenny
books that
from
come out on the market.
apartment to apartment, and he has more books than he has anything else.
But we should.
Books and bottles.
What I always tell the staff
Bottles.
after they get through training is that you should consider your job in our bar the same way that a sommelier considers his job in a restaurant, right? There's just an expectation that you should know these things, right? And so through the training program, we're trying to cover certain bases and hit certain like key readings that we think are important to the bar's identity, things that people who come into our bar might expect our bartenders to know. But really, we're just trying to start a fire, right? We're trying to start this craving for information and trying to show them, you know, also like how much time you should be spending every single week reading, right? Like if this is the reading assignment in the midst of all these other things that are part of this week of training, this is what your life should kind of look like, right? You should be reading this much outside of work. You should be, you know, trying to capture this type of information. You should know who these people are, and then you should be able to apply it in cocktails. I always tell our staff too that, you know, when guests come in, right? Everyday guests, not people who come to Tales, right? So everyday guests, when someone comes in and they just got off from work, right? They should barely scratch the surface of what we know as a staff, right? They might have 2 or 3 cocktails, right? We might share a little tidbit about why we chose bourbon, or we might not say anything at all because that's just not what the guest is into, right? But there should be this sense that when you come to the bar, you've only just like dug into the very shallow part of what our bar is, right? That there should be so much foundation there. And it doesn't matter if the guests ever get to that information or not. It just matters that it exists because it's who you are. And I think that comes from literature in a lot of ways as well.
And
So-
content. It's ongoing content. Whether it's your program, whether it's the cocktails that you're putting out, whether it's the staff that you've trained, like how much information do they have to be able to present themselves as professionals? So there's a tipping point, and especially you see it during training. Like we have these 12 stages, and they take however long they take. But there's something that happens to the individual that goes from the beginning to the end, and that person that you get at the end is so different from the person you got at the beginning. And that's so outside of everything else other than you've changed this person's work ethic. Like, they're just different now. They've learned how hard it is to work this hard. You know, maybe for the first time, maybe it's their first time shaking cold draft, and maybe it's their first time making drinks, or whatever the case may be. Maybe it's the first time that they've actually been expected to do something like this. But the person that you have at the end is so incredible. And we have this day that's they get to execute. So the last part of their last test for training is that they have to execute the entire 100 list once for $1, like every drink for $1.
And we tell the public this.
And we tell the public, so people are really excited. And they come to see people graduate. And it's I get to be their bar back, and it's the coolest thing I've ever done. Like, because it's not about anyone else but that person, you know. And when we first did it, we weren't sure. We're like, oh, well, crap, people are going to come in here for $1 drink, you know. And we're like, how are we going to handle the volume? And we're like super concerned about how our expectations of how the shift was going to go were so wrong. Like, they come in and they want to see this person go through this incredible feat. And when they're done with it, we toast, they clap. It's a beautiful celebration.
There's
and
a big line of people trying
there's
to
a
get a drink
big
for
line of
$1.
people.
You know, we're serving them punch in line. Everybody's hanging out and talking.
Happy. They're happy to wait. They're happy
Yeah.
to wait for this person to make them their drink.
You
when
get
it's
all
their
the
turn.
regulars who come in because they've seen this person grow. You know, we take the menu and we tape it to the bar top, and there's just a black Sharpie marker,
cross
and
it
you
out
just
and you're done.
knock them all off until they're done.
It's
right, and they're
so
all
awesome.
$1. And
They don't even care which drink they get at the end.
no,
Yeah.
no, it's about that person's day. It's rewarding them, welcoming them to the team, and you know, it's amazing how much I think guests pay attention to people's growth behind a bar, right? And if you can find a way to incorporate them into that, then they also appreciate that person every single day from that point forward, right? They're like, I saw this person grow, and I know everything that he had to go through, and I was there when he ordered or when he did the 100 drinks, and you know, I understand how much that person went through, because I think that this is everybody handles it differently, but I think a lot of bartenders in their mind currently like to talk about how maybe people don't understand how hard their job is, or the fact that this is their chosen profession, and there's that kind of that chip on the shoulder in the industry that we all generally do a pretty good job of like politely handling. But I think that's in a lot of people, and this kind of gets rid of that, right? Because people know what you went through to become a member of that team, right? And they appreciate you that much more, and they're going to appreciate every single day that you serve them a drink after that. So it's this really great moment for our staff and in training. And then that same person then sits down next Tuesday for someone else who might be training, and they've been through it all. So again, it's that team mentality. All right, moving forward so we can get to some of the other stuff. Speed and efficiency. So like I said, it's 5 people versus the world at Anvil. That's how it works. So it's hard, and training on Fridays and Saturdays used to just go with me standing behind you and telling you every single thing to do. Like, don't touch that with your right hand, touch it with your left hand, right? Alex remembers that, right? And I've gotten more polite at training now. That maybe is a good way to put it.
We've grown up a lot. We've grown up a lot.
But really, I think that's how I was trained, right? It's like, go faster, you're not keeping up. We really need you to, the service wall's backing up, right? And
what's this, what's that?
yeah, go. And it's just, that's not how that works. You know how you get faster on Friday and Saturday? You get faster on Tuesday, right? You get faster on Tuesday by trying to figure out how to do that job faster when you have time to think about it. And when you have
more
conversations.
knowledgeable about your product. You have more knowledge about your product. If you know your recipes, if you're armed with the right sources, you are going to be just fine. Like, that's how you get faster. You get faster by becoming a better bartender in your own bar, which, we talk a lot about retaining staff and how do we retain staff. And I've had this conversation over and over with several people about how long they have someone before they move on and do something else. And it tends to be, I think, an epidemic in the industry right now that people jump around a lot. And we like to tell people that if they're going to come to work for us, they need to make at least a 1-year commitment. We're investing a huge amount of resources into your training. But also, even if you only stayed for 6 months, you would just barely be getting over the training program. And then you would need to have enough time to know if this is your skill, if this is your craft, if this is really what you want to do. So to give it a fair shake, we ask you to stay with us for a year. We don't make you sign anything, and we don't do anything like that, but we do ask that be a verbal commitment of, we're going to invest this much time and effort into you. Please consider that these things are very, very monumental to us, and that you should stay with us for a whole year.
Speed and efficiency.
Yeah, so speed and efficiency, I think, is probably the most challenging part of the 6 different areas, just because I see people that want to go too fast immediately. Like, they see the speed and the way that everybody works at Anvil right now, and they want to immediately match that. And that's when they start making mistakes, is
And
they try to build...
frustrated with themselves.
Yeah, they try to build 8 drinks at once, all in one go. And I always tell them, break it down, make 1 drink. Now let's move on, make the next one. Then the next week, maybe we'll get around to actually putting those drinks together in a single go, because the eagerness is there, but the foundation has to be light, really tight to be able to do that well. But it's such a good feeling whenever you actually see people be able to put it together, and you're like, oh, there you go, you finally have it, and like they get so excited. And it's such a work in progress. It takes at least 6 months for somebody to actually be able to perform at Anvil on a Friday and Saturday.
And there's just no time for that. Like, has anybody ever had this experience when you're bartending? Like, if your hands ever done something you didn't know they could do? You know what I'm talking about? Like, you'll be making like drinks and you're really busy and you're in the rush and you're like, what was that? And then you try and do it again and you can't, right? Like, it's just your subconscious in making drinks has surpassed like what your mind can keep up with, right? Or if you're ever making a group of drinks and like something interrupts you or you just lose your place, right? It's like I'm in a conversation and and it's like I just made 6 drinks and I didn't think about it the whole time. Like, I just somehow right hand was just Pim's cupping. It was just.
I think we have a drink on the menu called the Pliny's Tonic that is, I think somebody will shoot us if we take it off the menu. We could probably do it blindfolded. Right here. We could all 3 probably be blindfolded and make that drink.
We did that one day at the Pishy where we played who can make a margarita blindfolded the quickest. But I think that like those moments should happen on Fridays and Saturdays, right? Because there's no time for anything else to happen, right? And you get to that point by trying to make it better. And it's not just about cocktails. And I really think that this is where people mix up on a lot of stuff, is if I get the chance to work a weekday shift with someone, I might talk about cocktails a lot, but until they start doing everything else outside of the job right, I'm probably not going to give them too many tips on how to get better at making drinks, because like Kenny said, I just want those to be right every single time. Work on them as you can. I'll keep up and make it okay. You know, it's just like worry about those things. Here's why you're not efficient, because when you reach over the bar top, you don't pull things back with you, right? When you go back to the POS to take care of tabs, you don't take care of multiple tabs at the same time. All right, these are the things that make people quicker behind the bar. And I think that this other thing that's happening in how we talk about cocktails and bartending a lot right now is that we're talking about like what's high volume. You know, Tales of the Cocktail has created this award for best high volume cocktail bar, right? What does that mean? I think it probably means that you save more time to take care of your guests, right? Not that you make drinks faster than everybody else. Does that make sense? Right? So I can handle the POS. I can grab multiple beers at the same time. I pull things. I bus correctly. I do everything else around making a cocktail that makes me more efficient, right? And I think that that's really how you get faster. And those are only lessons that you learn from bartending for years and years and years, right? That's the only way that you get quicker. And so you have to take those moments, and they're moments, right? They're moments that happen Sunday through Wednesday. They're not on Friday or Saturday because everybody's moving quickly to say, when you pull that, pull it all at the same time, right? Which you could just let go that day if you wanted to. You don't have to talk about that on Tuesday because it's probably not super important. They'll probably turn around 30 seconds later and get it, right? But you don't have the time to do it on Friday. So you better do it on Tuesday to get better on the weekends. Does that make sense? So, and it's that attention to detail as a trainer, that there is a right way to be more efficient during slow times when it doesn't matter so that you're better when it does. Yes?
How do you guys break up the bar? I mean, you've got 5 bartenders, so does each person have a station
Mm-hmm.
they're working at?
All of the stations have all of the ingredients.
Yeah, we have 5 stations. Between each station is a POS, so we have 3 stations behind the bar. Every single station is exactly the same. You don't have to move more than 2 feet to make 108 cocktails. That's just every single person works in the exact same station, so they have the exact same experience, so that when they work on Tuesday, if they're in second well from the door, they're working the exact same way. I think that just always depends on the bar that you're working in. That happens to work for us because of the shape of the bar, right, where distribution of the guest matches the layout of the bar, because it's just a shotgun style setting with a little curve at the end, right? So every bartender kind of faces the same number of guests on a Friday or Saturday because of the physical distribution of the bar. So I just think it depends on which situation, but I do think it's important to keep each of those stations consistent, right? So that every single day that is practice for the Friday and Saturday, right? There is no context to the station that you work in. You just come to work, and work is the same job every single day. I think that's important to becoming more efficient. So.
During training, we have speed rounds, and throughout the program, they build up to more drinks. So I think the first one is 5.
Yep.
Then it's 10. Then it's 15.
And it builds up to like
and
30.
it builds up to
yeah.
quite a few. And the reason for that is just to put you on the spot, basically, and have you make drinks in front of your peers, and then your peers can relay information to you as to what you should have done. You should have touched that bottle once and not 3 times, and how you can cut that time. And the difference is massive. Like from that training on a Tuesday to a Friday night, they start to think that way, and how to consolidate steps and how to make things more efficient, because you had that conversation with them one-on-one on a Tuesday afternoon versus on a Friday afternoon when they're just thinking about moving and going, and they're in the middle of an adrenaline rush.
And that's the real how-to discussion too, is like, so let's say that for your first tasting, we have you make gin Collins with Beefeater, and then we have another cocktail with Beefeater in it too, and some random shit in the middle, right? So you're making 3 drinks, right? Do you touch the Beefeater once, or do you touch it twice, right? We probably don't have time to talk about that unless there's no guest in the bar and you just made these 3 drinks for us, and we saw that you touched it for each individual drink as opposed to both together, right? And during the shift, you may have to touch the Beefeater once and make that cocktail, and then touch the Beefeater a second time to make the third, to make sure that we're giving guests a good cocktail, right? But when we're talking about it and when it's right in front of you and we have a chance to to just nitpick at how you get faster, that's the lesson that comes from that that's not appropriate at any other time, right? And so again, it's about taking that time. And that's the biggest cost of training is not the dollars, it's the take the time to sit down and do it. And it's to do it in front of the entire staff and have your peers tell you what works for them and what doesn't work for them. That's the real challenge of all that. But it's funny because I think that we have that moment with people, and sometimes it's individual and sometimes it's separate, where they didn't realize that you build drinks like that. Does anybody else build drinks like that, right? I assume you touch the Beefeater once if you're making 4 cocktails and 2 of them have Beefeater, right? It never even occurred to them that that's what you should do, right? Because it's an individual recipe per drink, and instead at some point in your bartending career, you evolve past making 1 drink at a time to making an order, right? Like I now know the recipe for this order of 4, right? As opposed to I know 4 different recipes, right? And so that evolution and that moment when that occurs, I think most people find that out themselves while they're bartending. We don't have time for that anymore. In this day and age of cocktails, we need people to learn that quickly, right? And that happens during quiet time. So, all right, service and hospitality.
When we get new members into our bar, and also for a lot of you that work in these cocktail bars, there's a lot of PR and press that's been behind them. The expectation of the guest when they're walking in the door of that person standing behind that bar, whether they've been there for 3 years or 3 days, is the same. So the guest expectation is so important, and it's always good to relay that to your staff. So when we hire someone, we let them know, these are the things that people expect you to know. I have been asked all kinds of things. People think that I can make soda. Someone asked me if I distilled whiskey once, and like, I don't. That's wonderful that you think that I would be able to. But their expectations are massive, and because of that, your bartenders need to know what they are so that they can know what level of training that they need to get to. Everybody's going to be different at the time that you're hiring them. And service and hospitality is huge. Also, we work in a bar where we can't hold the door. We're not, our consumer will not allow us to hold the door. So we know that, and all we need to do is address all of the issues that come along with getting 50 people walking in at once, or getting 50 people walking out at once, which is just the same thing. And when we go through the training program, a lot of it has to do, even in the situations where we have these the speed runs where everybody gets to make 5 drinks and then 10 drinks, we have other people, your staff members, sit in front of you and ask you questions and ask you your name, what's your favorite color. Like, you're sitting there trying to recreate an environment that's as close as to what it's going to get to on the weekends. And
you can fail the speed test by not being cool.
You can fail the speed test.
Like, you looked way too stressed to.
Yeah.
I know you did that in like 2.5 minutes, but sorry, that's not. you gotta do it cooler than that. That's not. Yeah.
Or those are the things that will trip you up. Do I know this recipe? Absolutely. I can recreate it for you over and over. There's 10 people in front of me asking me questions now. I don't know if I put gin in this. It's a completely different environment. So we do that during training so that they can have a better sense of how to perform and what their level of expectation from the guest is. And we do it as much as we possibly can to be able to have them. And then they also understand that there's a level of service involved. It's not just, I make a great cocktail and here you go, I'm going to sell it to you. It's like, I make a great cocktail and you're going to have a great experience while you're sitting in front of me, which is very, very different from being trained from one-on-one and telling you exactly what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. It's like, how much did your guest enjoy this experience, which is everything.
And I think that's how do you structure that in a person? Like, I think maybe the one thing that we're missing in this seminar, and I think it's intentional because it's a whole nother seminar, is making sure that you hire the right people first. And I think that's the biggest first step in trying to make sure that you have good hospitality behind the bar, right? But let's just assume that you're all doing that because we probably all have different standards of who the right person is, right? I personally think that really great hospitality and service is about one thing. And it took me a while to learn it, and I think it's about humility. You have to completely give yourself to the guest, and you have to give everything about who you are to the guest experience. And so I think that the first step for every single person that we get who comes into the bar is for them to learn some level of humility. I think the training program does that in some regards, right? But we have this one new employee, right?
Right around the
That
fourth week.
We won't call his
They're
name out, but
very-
he's the youngest member of the staff who also thinks that he's the best, right? Does anybody have this guy, right? The youngest member who thinks that he's the best.
He also gets a lot of errand work.
Yes, he's currently not working because he has stitches in his hand, so that's how wonderful he is. Anyways, so
He also sometimes paints the fence and
Yeah.
fixes the taps, and it's like, oh, okay.
But
Well,
we
I'll
had-
see you on Tuesday. You're going to clean the taps for me. And he's like, oh.
But we had to have this one conversation one day because he was bartending in front of me, and I came to see him, and it was just awful. You know, like it was just the whole thing was really bad, and there was no way to cover it up. So I had to talk to him, and it was like, Stuart, do you think? Dang it. I was frustrated in the moment. Anyways.
I know. I almost
I was
did
like,
it too. I'm like, no, he's going to do it.
Do you think that you're doing a good job? And he was like, of course. You know,
Of course.
all the drinks that I made and I was, doing all of these things, and I was like, Stuart, I mean, I don't really know how to tell this to you, but you're awful, right? I mean, you're really bad at this. And he's like, and I was like, don't get offended, right? You're supposed to be awful, right? You've been bartending for a year, right? You're not supposed to be good, right? The difference between where I want you to be and where you're at now is that you don't acknowledge that, right? You think that you're tremendous. You've come through training so far, and you're making drinks for people and stuff like that. You don't do any of the little things correct, right? Because you just don't have enough experience behind the bar to notice them, right? And that's okay. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, we knew that when we hired you, we were hiring a new person to come into the bar, and we felt like doing that at that time because we had an experienced staff, and they're going to balance you out. They're going to pick up the little things. And I like having young people behind the bar. It makes things more interesting and exciting sometimes, right? But the key there is that those younger members of the staff, they have to know that they're not at that point yet. Because what happens in that situation is that they have this sense of urgency, right? You ever like gone to a restaurant and you've had someone, who was training take care of you? Right? So they've got someone standing behind them and they're walking them through the process. What does that do to you as a diner? It changes your entire perspective, right? You're like, oh, it's this person's first time. Like, it's almost like you get involved a little bit. You're like, man, I want to be a good table, right? Like, whereas if it was just a regular server, you'd just be like, whatever, I hope I get enough iced tea, right? Like, it's just like your whole mindset changes where it's like, I want to do a good job as a customer for this new person, right? And I think that the same thing happens with younger bartenders. You ever get a younger, eager bartender that takes care of you, right? And maybe they share with you that they've been working here for 4 months, right? And it kind of lets you relax a little bit. You almost become like a stakeholder in that person's future, right? And I'm like, that's who I need you to be, Stuart. Like, I need you to be the person that's excited about where you want to be as a bartender by acknowledging that you're not there yet, right? And that's humility, and it's important. And it's that exchange across the bar where it's like, I don't know what rye that is, but I'll go get it and let's try it together, And
Instead of just giving me the wrong
yeah,
answer.
that process.
Or
I think
presenting
that's
yourself
hospitality.
as someone who is knowledgeable and experienced and not being that person. That's the worst. Nice, call it Stuart out.
Yeah. Sorry, Stuart.
Sorry, Stuart.
Not
We'll
that sorry.
Talk about it later.
All right, management and ownership.
Everybody owns this bar.
Yeah.
They all own it. It's like if you work there, you will have a responsibility. So we break up the responsibilities within the staff so that they can either do inventory, cost out. Even in the training process, towards the end, they all learn how to cost out a drink. Important to know because they know if they're spilling a drink, they know how much it costs. And also when they're creating a drink, they know how much that drink is going to cost. Everybody knows how to, what the recourse is when you don't do this or you don't do that. So everybody has the responsibility of making sure that the shift goes well and that the bar is being run well because it's everybody's responsibility, not just one person.
And I think everybody handles this differently. So handle it best for your own personality and how it works for you. But there's just no question for me as an owner that's hands off. It just,
Right.
It doesn't exist. Like, you want to know how much I get paid? You want to know how much money the bar makes every single
You can know
year?
everything.
You know that because we talk about how much money the bar made last week every single week. Every single week we talk about it. We talk about how much money we spent on labor. It's written down on a sheet of paper how much everybody makes in a salaried position. Everybody knows how much every single person makes in the bar. They know how much all of the cocktails cost. I mean, everything about that is laid out in front of people. I feel like when people come to work for us, a big part of who we are as a company, and this is kind of bigger than Anvil and Pastry War, because we've opened a restaurant called Underbelly and a beer bar, Hay Merchant, and a coffee shop, Blacksmith, and we run a nonprofit bar now too. A big part of who we were as a company was supporting individuals and trying to acquire their own dreams, right? And I really like to think that we're always going to be like that. And so for me, it's that transparency that I think is part of the lessons that we give to the staff that comes to work for us, is that they have access to anything so that they can grow into whoever they want to be, right? You work for me for 10 years if you want to. You can leave after a year and a half because you want to go do your own thing. You can open your own bar. I, as an owner, when we go through this process of training and our experiences together, when you choose to leave one day, I want to be proud of who you've become, right? And that's what's most important to me. And I think that I have such a good relationship with so many people who have worked for us in the past who don't anymore, because that's always been my goal, is I just want you to leave a better person, in both in terms of what your skill set is now, and then what your work ethic is, and how you believe in certain spirits and don't believe in others, and just, you know, maybe you don't buy all of that, you know, Bobby dogma, but it's something that you're informed of and that you're aware of now. I just want to be proud of who you've become in that time, and I think that I do that by being as transparent as I possibly can, right? If you think you can run your own bar, here's all the information. Like, go do it and let me help. You want me to help you write a business plan when you get to that point? I'll do it. Like, whatever it takes. That's, again, we're paying off a debt as owners to our staff through education.
And I think the other thing to face as a bar owner is knowing that everyone will eventually leave you. This is it's a contract. You're employing people. They're here with you for a certain amount of time, and they are totally in control of how long that is. So you can make it very valuable for both of you. We're in a situation where everybody wins. You get an excellent person that's working for you, and they also get an excellent education. Or it could not be that way. But the reality is that when you employ someone, you know, they will eventually move on, do other things. That's the nature of being a bar owner. And understanding that from the front end is so important, because you can either set up training programs like this and get people ready to be successful, or we could not do that and sit around and think about all the people that have left and moved on and done other things. And there's no progress there. You know, and the key is for everyone to move on and grow. And we, like I said earlier, it's like we've grown a lot. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we've seen so many people, we've trained so many people through so many different ways. And I always feel like we walk away with a lot. You know, we walk away with knowing incredible people and having set up these programs. The thing that's the most valuable for me is always going through that with someone. Like I mentioned earlier, like seeing someone at the beginning and then seeing someone at the end. And they're just so different. And then we're spending 10 to 12 hours a day with them. Like, make it valuable, you know. You're gonna be there anyway. The bar is gonna be open. The bar has a steady hours. And if you're gonna spend that time, make it valuable and make it count.
I know there's a couple questions, and I want to run through the training guide real fast. But the one other thing that I wanted to say is when I opened Anvil, I was 25 years old, and I think made a lot of mistakes with the bar, you know, just because that's what 25-year-olds do. I think the thing that always like saved me was admitting when I was wrong, or sharing an error, you know, and talking about this is what we didn't do right here, or we shouldn't have designed this menu this way for this reason. And again, like it's about giving yourself up and giving it to the staff member, right? Because in that situation, if you're going to be educating, you're going to be educating through admitting fault, right? And I think that's really important too. So for people who are opening their first bars, right, again, that transparency about errors is educational in and of itself. And I think that's really important too. So I would keep that in mind. Lindsay, can we? So is it cool if I just run through these?
Yeah,
and we
go
get
for
some
it.
All right. So
Yeah,
we
we got
have
like 15
we have
minutes.
12 weeks in our training program, and like I said, you can download all of this online. So we're not going to spend a lot of time looking at it, but I just want to kind of look through it. Each week has like a title. So week 1 is deer in the headlights, right? And these are our training manual has a sheet for every single one of these different sections, okay? So when we're training someone as a staff, we can go profile and goals. Here's this, and we pull out everything for shift 1, hand them all that material, review all that material, quiz them if necessary, and sign off on it so that in that manual, the person who looks at the manual next can go, okay, cool, we're on shift 2 now. Let's talk about all the stuff for shift 2. It's in this manual here for you. You know, we've signed it all off. And so we just go through all of these different weeks. So week 1 is deer in the headlights. Lindsay, you keep going. We've got week 2, the broken spirit, right?
It's so true.
We want you to feel this way, right? Like if you don't feel this way, you're probably not taking the job seriously enough. You're a little too cocky for where you need to be, right? And also, like before we spend $7,000 to $8,000 on a person, we need to figure out if we made a mistake or not, right?
And there's
we
no
don't think that we're going
shame.
to. We've never had
Yeah.
to let anybody go after 2 weeks, but like we need to figure out whether or not you're capable of doing this. And we also need to scare you into understanding the job that you just took, right? Because like quite frankly, you work for me. Right, and so it's not going to get any easier because I'm a really hard person to work for. So I just want to be open with you right from the beginning. Week 3, the shaky legs, right? So and you'll notice that we're getting different content here. You know, now we've 3 weeks in, we expect you to know all 108 cocktails, basics of fortified wine knowledge, Finish and Buy by David Wondricks. We've got tests on these 2 issues. If you don't pass the test, you don't go on to week 4. Week 4 is the tired soldier, right? At this point, you've accepted your fate.
This is the point where you hate us.
Yeah, you've accepted your fate, right? And so we decided that we're going to start teaching you the ways that these cocktails came to be. So we're moving beyond recipes at this point in time into basics of cocktail balance for citrus and stirred, basics of speed and efficiency, like I was talking about earlier, creating 3 twists on primary classics. We're reading Harry Johnson in a test. Week 5, the server, right? So this is a week about hospitality more than anything else. The content is pretty simple outside of hospitality. You're going to read Setting the Table by Danny Meyer, right? We're also just going to do things all week long for like looking for opportunities for hospitality, whether it's this girl's strap on her dress broke. Can we go around and ask guys if they have like a safety pin in their pocket? I don't know. That was some example I remember recently. Like we're just going to try and find every example during the shift that we possibly can to show how far we could go with hospitality. Week 6, the balancing act. So now we're starting to get into tasting. So basics of spirit tasting with rum, reading assigned materials on rum, tiki cocktail and creation. We did a Tiki Tuesday week at Anvil for a while, so it's kind of a big part of our bar's personality. Week 7, the triple threat. So this is part 1. So in this situation, what we've got is we've got basics of tasting, continue and stuff, but we're going to advanced speed and efficiency training part 1. And getting into a little bit more of that, basics of cocktail creation. All right, week 8, it's like the same thing. So you can see that we're basics of spirit tasting part 2, basics of cocktail creation part 2. So more drawn out information at this point in time. You're getting blind spirit tasted every single week. If you don't pass your speed taste test for 30 random drinks and your blind taste test number 2, you're not moving on. So you've got to pass these different obstacles.
It's pretty stressful around week 8.
Yeah, week 9. It's pretty stressful around week, whatever.
Week 8's a hard one because they can almost see the light, but it's still far away.
Yeah.
You know, they're like.
And I think you can jump from 30 to 40 pretty quickly with the taste test. And you know, there's an established time. Everybody has to meet the same time. Week 10, we're at like novice bartender stage. You know, we're feeling pretty good about your time behind the bar now. But as part of working in a cocktail bar and not just being a drink jockey, you know, we've got finalize an original cocktail. So this should be something that's more than just a deliberate expansion upon a classic. We're getting into speed and taste tests with 50 random drinks. We've got blind taste test number 4, 11. Okay, we're just continuing this year, like even more, just random drink tests, blind tasting, you know, calculate cost for original cocktail, finalize recipes, source 5 classic cocktails that are not standardized at Anvil. So one thing that we do every single time that we hire a new person is we take that as an opportunity to find 5 new classic cocktails that we don't currently make in the bar, right? Which contributes to them, you know, having more research abilities and getting into older books. And they have to, and honestly, I mean, that gets harder. Every single person that gets hired, it gets harder because there's less drinks out there that are game. So that happens a little bit more. And then week 12 is our final test. So we're talking about basic cocktail menu development because at this point in time, once you pass training, we expect you to be a contributor to the menu. Global cocktail bars and cocktail personality profiles. We start talking about menus from around different bars around the country, different people to watch. We try and encourage our staff to travel and go visit different people. So there's just an expectation that they would know peers from around the country that they necessarily may have not met because they're good standards from which we can hold ourselves. Week 12 materials test, and then we've got the 100 list speed and taste test. Serve the 100 list publicly for $1 each, and then the blind tasting, you got to blind taste 50 spirits, and then you are done with training, right, as it exists in these 12 weeks. But then training never really ends, right, because if you're not learning, like I said, you need to move on. So at that point in time, you get a raise, and then you get a new task. And the new task is you're now responsible for inventory. You're responsible for maintaining the beer taps. You're responsible for this or that, right? And then we rotate that so that at a certain point in time, you've done every single job or duty in the bar as a different personality. And so that's just, at that point, you've transitioned into someone that is a stakeholder in managing the bar. You may not carry a specific management title of general manager, right? But bar management is just about team management. That's really all it's about. So as a team, we're going to make sure that the bar does everything that it's supposed to do every single day. So.
It's also really important for them at this point to understand that we have, like, for example, at Amble, we have 7 personalities, and that's 7 personalities that can do that job. And the weight of that is really important so that they know what it's like to ask for time off or how that's going to affect the entire staff. When we hire you, we let you know it's like, you are one of 7 people in this city who can do this job. Can other people make cocktails? Absolutely. But manning the bar and owning the bar is completely different. So the weight of that responsibility needs to be clear.
I know we had a couple questions. We had one here and then one here, so we'll go 1 and 2. The cocktail that you guys got second was a Bobby Burns with Bowmore and Punta Mess. It's just kind of our house spec for a Bobby Burns. I hope you guys liked it. Tasty? Yeah? Okay, cool. Done? Done?